Rolling.
Hello, attendees of the webinar number 8, actually the umpteenth webinar, produced by the Jazz Journalists Association. This is Pro Photography at Jazz Festivals. I'm Howard Mandel, president of the Jazz Journalists Association. We're a 501c3 nonprofit of about 300 members who are writers, photographers, broadcasters, videographers, and new media professionals interested in the coverage of jazz. And the panelists we have tonight to talk about pro photography at jazz festivals are Karen Fox in Detroit. You want to say hello, Karen, please?
Hey, how's everybody?
And what have you been doing recently?
Oh gosh, just tons and tons of editing.
And Scott Saltzman, who's in New Orleans.
Howdy, howdy. I have been doing a very similar thing, as well as sitting in the French Quarter for the last 8-9 hours shooting balconies for in about 102-degree heat.
Oh my! And finally, Richard Conde. Richard, where are you? And what are they doing behind you there over in the screen? That photo to your right.
Oh, that's actually a photograph I took over at the Bronx Zoo of two western lowland gorillas.
I see. And where are you located? You're in Jersey, aren't you?
No, I'm not actually. I'm in upstate New York, up in Fishkill.
In Fishkill. Could you turn just a little bit more towards us somehow? Yeah, there we go.
Okay, good.
So, attendees, we have these veteran photographers who've spent a lot of time, energy, sweat and tears photographing jazz festivals. Is that a good thing to do, analysts? Is that a fun thing to do? Something you look forward to? Karen, why don't you start?
Oh wow. Yes and no. It depends. I think we all have our favorites. And mine personally is the Detroit Jazz Fest. That's one of my favorites. Right now I wish I was up in Newport, Rhode Island Jazz Fest, but right now it would be Detroit.
I see. And Scott, some of the places that you've been in, is this a good thing to do? You enjoy shooting fests?
It's a blast. It's something I look forward to every year. I don't get to shoot as many. I used to spend a lot of time on the road traveling from New Orleans to Canada, out to Colorado, down into Florida, onto the East Coast. And now that I have an 8.5-year-old who is a joy of my life, he keeps me a little more grounded here. So I shoot a lot of stuff more locally, but not even as much as I used to shoot. But it's great work. It's a lot of work, but it's great work.
Richard, what about, how does it fit into your schedule?
Oh man, my schedule has been so crazy the past couple of months. And I mean, I just got back from Karamore, before that to Saratoga, and actually I'm just packing just before we started this webinar for Newport for tomorrow night. And it's just been nonstop between the editing and everything else, and running here and there, and it's a lot of fun. I enjoy it. I love the music, and that's pretty much why I do it. So,
Is it a lucrative part of your professional portfolio? How does it fit in, like, I don't know, percentage-wise somehow, to the other things that you do professionally as photographers?
Well, for me personally, actually, I'm retired. I'm actually retired, retired police officer. So for me, if I ever thought I was going to make a lot of money with this, I would be kidding myself. So you don't make a lot of money. You're really hustling a lot, money from here to there, and not getting paid as much as you would like to. But the rewards later on, follow that. You have such a great time. The music is great. You meet a lot of great people. The percentage is I would say, maybe for me personally, I would say it's like 10%, 20% of my income, what I take in, as opposed to what I do other things. I do travel, and I do weddings also. So that takes on most of my income.
Does that about pay for itself? I mean, with the investment in travel and lodging and food and time, you feel like it's covered? Are you guys breaking even if you do festivals, or are you actually earning something extra?
Well, for me personally, it all depends. I mean, in the beginning it didn't, but when you get sent out, let's say I get sent out by All About Jazz to cover the Newport Jazz Festival, they'll pay for either the lodging, and I'll have to drive up. So there's a lot of give and take to it,
Right.
And I'm sure that it's the same for Karen and Scott too. So
Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes you break even.
yeah,
I've never found a per festival. I've never been able to do a cost benefit. It's always on the cost side rather than the benefit. For me, it's after almost 25 years of shooting it, there's a lot of stock that continues to evolve out of it. And because people have known that I've been shooting this stuff, they continue to come to me for work that may be current, that may be previous. So for me, it's more of a long-term investment. It's more, in many ways, it's more about stock, and stock sales are long-term, small sales, lots of sales, small over a long period of time, rather than, oh wow, I just earned $10,000 from this particular festival. I can't think of a particular festival that I make a bunch of money at, but over the course of time, there's not an insignificant amount of my income that comes from that.
Well, certainly festivals appeal to the jazz audience because people can go and hear many different artists, for one covered entry fee and during one concentrated amount of time. So it works the same for you. You guys can all, as I do, cover a lot of different music in the same amount of time, collect information or images, make contacts, strengthen them in a festival situation, and that is part of the investment and also the payoff, right, in the long run.
Right.
It would be for me, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So let's then.
I think Scott is right. I mean, the long term. I mean, immediate is not immediate, but in the long term, between the stock and sales and the further contacts, you do kind of break even or even go past that.
So let's go to the beginning then. Like, how do you choose what festivals to go to? Is it on the basis of how close they are to home, how low you can keep your expenses, or the places that are welcoming to you, or where your favorite music is? How do you select where to go?
Well, for me personally, since I'm a caregiver to my mom, it's location, really. And also maybe the lineup. I do have my favorites, but for right now, it'd be location.
That's an important factor.
Yeah.
And you have a market locally also then, yes?
Yeah.
What are some of your local markets that you can serve with festival coverage?
Well, I mean, right now, like I said before, we have the Detroit Jazz Fest that's coming up pretty soon, and this Saturday I'm shooting most of the Detroit bass players. It's their third annual, so there's going to be over about 100 bass players out front. So they're lesser known, but, I can still pretty much cover those type of things.
And how will you disseminate that photo? How you do?
Well, we have some local magazines around here, like Detroit Hour, Uptown Detroit, or an In-Town Detroit magazine as well, and newspapers.
And you tell them that you're going to be doing that coverage and that things will be available for you?
Right, definitely. And how quickly you can get it to them. That's another factor.
Richard, you're going to Newport, as am I, and what are your plans for that?
In terms of how to shoot it, or in terms of
no, who have you been in touch with to be a recipient of your images? Do you have somebody who's taking the images?
Yeah, well, actually, I'm shooting for the festival itself, so I'm actually shooting for George Green. But the photographs will be similar to either Jazz Times or All About Jazz, and also I Rock Jazz. They will be getting the images as soon as I finish editing them. So that's pretty much it on that.
Did you contact well, you're working for the festival.
Right.
How does that work?
Well, actually, it started out, I had a show in the city, and I invited George Green to come by. He bought a couple of prints, and one thing led to another, and he invited me to come down to the festival 2 years ago. And then from that point on, he said, okay, I want you to be the official photographer. So that's pretty much how I work. I've been only been here for about this will be the third year. And so doing that, with that, I also contacted the editors that I've been dealing with and told them what the situation was. I said, fine, send us the pictures and we'll post them and we'll take care of whatever we have to take care of. And that's pretty much how it went.
Scott, have you ever worked for the festival itself, one of the festivals?
No, I've always been able to avoid that. I'd say avoid that because I actually used to shoot Newport. I shot Newport for about 7 or 8 years running. And it's both jazz and folk festival up there are just amazing festivals, and festival productions are really great people to work around. There's a guy that I'm very close with who used to do a lot of their shooting for him, and every so often we talk about, well, maybe you'll shoot it this year and I can take the year off and just enjoy. But what I enjoy about just shooting it on my own as opposed to shooting for somebody else is that I have complete freedom to shoot what is interesting me and what's driving me either musically or visually. And usually it's both of those things because my work isn't just a straight up concert image. I tend to look around that and behind that. And that isn't necessarily that interesting to festivals anymore. There's, 30, 40 years ago, there were great photographers who could sit in the back and photograph things that nobody ever got to see. And those were beautiful that was beautifully imagery to have. You don't have that kind of access anymore, or you have very little of that access. And hopefully Richard is getting some of that access because he's working directly for the festival. It's really only that person often that gets that kind of access, and even that today is getting more and more and more and more and more and more and more limited, just because of the way contracts work with various musicians and what their agents say you can and you cannot shoot, and how you can shoot and when you can shoot. So not being tied to that, back again, means that I can still tailor what I shoot and how I shoot. It means that I typically am not getting paid for it. And that's okay for me because, again, over that 25 years, I've seen it as a slow growth piece for me. And I continue to develop the archive, and I continue to develop the relationships with the people. And every so often you get the phone call saying, hey, we're going to be in town. We'd like to hook up with you and maybe do some shooting around this next album or whatever might come up with that, without having to be tied to, oh, I got to get to this stage, I got to get to this stage, I got to get to this stage, I got to get to this stage. That part I've never really found interesting. I still move a lot with multiple stage festivals, but I move on my terms, not on if I want to stay for a full set on somebody, I stay for a full set because I'm really getting something out of it.
And you're in the crowd. You're in the crowd. You're not backstage.
No, I'm in the pit usually, or I'm up on stage. Most of the festivals that I've shot, I've had relationships with them or with the press organizers, so I have been blessed enough to be able to get most of the access that I need in limited shots. I mean, I shoot at the New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Festival every year for the last 20-some years. And after the second year, I had stage access for that. And that's because of the relationships that I started to develop, and I foster those. And I value that highly. So I try not to step on people's toes when there's other things going on. I don't always have to be on stage. Matter of fact, there's only a limited number of images to get from the stage. Often there's a lot more interesting imagery to get from the front of the stage. So,
Karen, I want to ask you about your relationship with the festival. But first, I need to do one follow-up with Richard. Is there any problem when you're both working with the festival and supplying photos to the publications? Or are those...
No, I mean, he's pretty much told me I got as much freedom as I want to in terms of how I wanted to submit photographs, just to give him what he needs in terms of what makes the festival is what it is, and that's pretty. I have a lot of freedom. I haven't been told I can't I can't do this, that, or the other. So he's okay, and I'm okay with it.
Karen, how do you work with the Detroit Jazz Festival? They know you're there. Do they expect to get coverage from you in certain ways?
Sometimes I think they are, because this will be my third time working with them. They're getting to know my face, and they're getting to know me, especially the guys who work around backstage in areas like that. when I do work for the magazine In Town Detroit, I pretty much get what I'm assigned to get, and then after that I try to get creative, get my creative eye going for my personal use, you know, whether it be for my website or my portfolio and things like that. I do look at myself, one, as a working photographer, and then two, I try to look at myself as an artist. So it's like a two-part thing that I try to do at the fest, but I think they're beginning to know my face a lot more.
Do you do marketing of yourself and your services before the festival, like 3 months ahead to the publication, saying I'm going to be there? Like Richard says, you know, I contacted the magazines and told them I was coming. And then do you also do it afterwards if you didn't get assignments? I've got this great stuff. You should see this stuff.
I'm pretty much afterwards. You know, because I don't know, I kind of look at myself as a little late bloomer. I try to let other photographers submit their stuff, and then I have this like idea in the back of my head, like, well, maybe I got a different angle than what they've seen. So I pretty much do mine afterwards.
So in New Orleans, well, and I'd have to add that shooting at the New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Festival, one of the local weeklies has been credentialing me for that for most of the last 15 years probably, and there was a different organization that was prior to that. So I would say to people that are interested in doing that, you usually, or in my experience, you usually have to have somebody that's saying, yes, you should be there. And then if you're expanding out beyond that, that's a beauty. But for me, Gambit is the organization that I'm there for, and I supply them on a daily basis with stuff for their blog. But again, it's rare that the editors will say, we need this person, we need this person, we need this person. I've been doing it for so long that very often it's, Scott, we show us what your best stuff is every day, and that's perfectly fine. And then at the end, we usually have a wrap-up, and I've shot the stuff that I'm most interested in, and that's the stuff that will continue to grow my own archives and my own interests. And again, I would share the same thing that Karen. I don't tend to market beyond that before the festival. There's no particular need for me to, because I'm there. I'm already there. I don't need to work on being there, and that's often the biggest hurdle, is being able to be there as a working journalist. How do you get there as a working journalist? And being credentialed is the easiest way to make that happen. It's the way to go. But it's not an easy thing to do. So.
Well, I mean, Richard, you were very lucky to have George come to a George Wein, the producer of the Newport Jazz Festival and so many other festivals in the past, to come to a show and say, yeah, I like your work. Come and, I mean, that's just leaping into the Pleasure Dome right from the start, isn't it?
It was a miracle. It was actually the only 2 sales that I had in the whole show. and that was like the only 2 sales that I had in the whole show. And Hank Jones' manager came that week also and saw the pictures that I had of Hank Jones and gave me the whole week of recording sessions with Ron Carter, Kenny Barron, Jack DeJohnette. It was just incredible. So it was just the two people that had to be, that should have been there, were there, and that was it. That whole week was incredible. Yeah.
Very lucky.
Yeah.
Well, go ahead, Scott.
Well, I was just going to, you talked about George, and I share your feeling that he's an amazing man, but I don't know if anybody else knows that he's also an amazing musician. If you want to just real quick come to the desktop, I've got an image of him at the Jazz Fest back in 2005 in New Orleans. I'm not seeing anything but my piece right now. But
Joanne, will you make Scott the presenter, please?
Just real quick.
I think she's doing it. There we go.
There he is.
It's the magic of technology.
Yeah, there it is.
Screens, folks. We're going to have, whoa, a little, okay.
Yeah.
Make it bigger.
I can't. I pulled it off my website. It's not another image. Can you see it well enough or not?
Yeah, I can see it. I can see it.
Yeah, I can see it.
I'm sorry. I I don't have the original image. I just yanked it off. As you were talking, Richard, I went, oh, I've got a picture of George Clinton. So he's an amazing jazz pianist for those folks that don't know.
So this looks like it was taken in the jazz tent, which is relatively close confines, isn't it?
So their venues have changed through the years. Back in 2005, this was a pretty expansive tent, and the stage was fairly sizable. So no, not in this particular instance. There was some good amount enough room. But this is kind of an example of being able to be on stage and in actuality backstage, to be able to capture something that somebody from the audience couldn't see this. They couldn't see the intensity of that, nor his relationship to everyone else. And that's some of the things that I personally try and capture when I have that kind of access. It's a different kind of shot than shooting from the front of the stage.
Right.
And it just happens to be George.
We should tell the attendees, just for those people who haven't been to these festivals, that New Orleans is what, 11 separate stages or something like that, and a large infield with crafts and foods and all sorts of fantastic distractions.
Yeah, it's definitely got a lot going on. I can pull up a couple images of what the actual fairgrounds look like if you're interested. There's 11 or 12. I'm sorry, I lose count because they keep adding. It's in a racetrack, actually. So they use the infield of the racetrack for part of those stages. Some of the main stages are down there, and then they have a number of tents on the outside of the track. And that's over a course of 7 days, over 2 weekends. You have a changeover anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour and a half per stage. So you can do the numbers to figure out how many actual acts you have access to every day for 7 days. It's quite a festival.
Yeah. And Karen, describe the Detroit International Jazz Festival these days. What's the layout? How many stages and that sort of thing?
I do believe there are 4 to 5 stages. There's usually one main stage, which is down towards the waterfront. And they usually have another stage where they kick off in the evening, which is towards the middle part of downtown. But last year was kind of crazy because I think they had way too many artists. But this year they kind of streamlined it. And they also put out the schedule early enough this time. So I could sit down and go where I want to go, to capture an artist.
I'm sorry. I think the time I was there were 3 stages on the waterfront, on the river, and then a long avenue that had crafts and food on either side that led to that center early evening stage, which is near the downtown that had the department stores.
Where the waterfall is, yeah.
Right. And maybe there was one more stage on the on that avenue between the two.
Right.
Right. And that's Labor Day weekend and 2 days, Saturday and Sunday.
No, actually, I think it's August 30th to September 1st. No, yeah.
Uh-huh.
It's like
so Friday and Saturday. Friday,
Saturday, Sunday, Monday, I do believe.
And Richard, do you know what the layout is of Newport this year? 3 stages? Is the layout at Newport this year 3 stages?
It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 3 stages, right? 1, 2,
right.
3. I forget. No, 4 stages. 4.
So 1 is on the promontory. That's the very large one that looks out onto the bay. There's one on the side of Fort Adams, and then inside the grassy area inside.
There's 2. There's one. You walk in, there's 1, and there's the main one that faces the water, and then you have, actually it's 3. Yeah, it's 3.
Yeah. So this is quite an area to hike around. I mean, you want to catch people at different stages that are running almost simultaneously. You have to move quickly, don't you? All of you.
Yeah, it depends on the scheduling and the timing, you know, and who you're, you know, who you're signed to follow, you know, who's the headliner, you know, and who's the legend, you know, so you have to scurry around as quickly as possible. Like I said, last year it was just crazy for us photographers. I mean, literally 6 minutes in the pit, and then you get out, you got to get out, and then you're running with all your equipment strapped to your back, you know, trying to get to the other location, and you've got, you know, people who are attending the festival, they're walking slow or they're in your way, you know, and you're trying to get to the next one. But
so there's a picture up right now of what a crowded day at Jazz Fest might look like if you want to look at it.
Gwen?
Karen? Sorry, Karen.
whoa.
So that's the main stage that you see, the little orange part right in here.
Not
That's
quite
the
up
main
yet.
stage.
Wait a minute.
And then there's a tent here, a tent here, a tent here. I'm actually working on the panorama for this one, and I'm sorry I don't have it ready yet. But, oh, hold on, you can't see it yet, can you?
Can't
No.
see it yet.
There. Oh, here it is. Is that better?
Not quite yet.
Oh. Sorry.
There we go.
All right. There's main
Oh,
stage.
yeah, okay.
Oh, God.
Oh, my God.
There's main stage. There's the jazz tent, the blues tent, the gospel tent. There's 2 stages in here and another stage over here, and then there's four more stages heading down in this direction. The panorama would actually is actually really cool. I'm just stitching it together. It's about I don't know, it's almost a gigabyte of file size, which is why I'm struggling to get it together. But anyways, it would show the whole stretch. So this is the infield that you're seeing here, where the horses would run out here where people are sitting. This was actually for Bruce Springsteen last year. And you see crowds like this not too infrequently. There were 142,000, I think, that day.
Wow.
That's huge.
Yeah, it was way huge. Really difficult to get through. We were shooting from here, right in front of here. This was the soundboard. It took us 45 minutes after we had 3 songs, and with Bruce Springsteen, you were saying 6 minutes and out. Wow. We had Bruce Springsteen. We only had 3 songs, but Bruce Springsteen playing 3 songs is about a half an hour, right?
That's long.
So
That picture makes Newport look like a walk in the park.
Yeah.
That's a walk. Newport is nothing. Newport is just walking around because it's only between one stage out to the other, maybe like less than 3 minutes.
And Newport is a breeze compared to this. You're absolutely right. It took us 45 minutes to walk out from where we were positioned here. They made us come out this way, and it took 45 minutes to walk out to here before I could actually get over to the lift to be able to take this shot from.
And I heard it rained pretty hard last year too, so that must have been like.
Got lots of mud images. It was quite a time.
Yeah. Oh God.
It was actually the coldest jazz fest that I'd ever been at in 20-some years.
Really?
It's not usually cold during jazz fest.
I don't think last year Newport topped 10,000 on either day.
No.
In fact, the second day was 4,000 in attendance, which seemed quite small to me.
Yes, I thought they were usually around 15 or 20,000 a day.
No, they can't get more than 12 in there,
Okay.
and they have not been pushing attendance very hard, although I think that the 4,000 surprised them last year. It wasn't...
It's
I
great for
don't think that was
people
what they
moving
expected.
around, but not great for the organizers.
Right.
They had a good lineup last year too, so I don't know what the problem was.
Huh.
You know.
It was
Yeah, I
because
don't know
Karen
either.
didn't make it out. That was
Next time.
a big thing.
So, considering these problems, I mean, I guess first we should talk about the carrying the equipment around. How much equipment do you take with you? What do you choose to work with? How do you decide what to carry?
Well, for me personally, I'm a 2-camera person. I put like the big long zoom on one, and then maybe a 17 to 55 2-point on the other. The zoom is usually 70 to 300 2.8, so you can just switch back and forth without, you know, swapping off lenses.
That's
I'm a
pretty-
Nikon girl.
I see.
I could tell with the 1755. There's a little Nikon sitting right back on the...
Yay!
I actually carry fairly similarly 7200 to 8, but I often will keep a couple of fun lenses, what I call fun lenses, with me. So that will cover a reasonable range. Although I'm usually around the 24-120 is their.
The 24-120, yeah. It's an f4.
That they have, and then the kind of the 70-200 on the other end. But I'll often have a 14 with me just to play a little bit, or a lens baby because I'm interested in exploring some particular music form in a soft manner. So
Right.
I'll keep a couple of those in my bag too. But I used to carry everything with me, and with the vest, and with the belts, and it was insane. You're exhausted as it is. But I think over time you learn to really trim down to only what you know you're really going to shoot with. It's like, I never pulled out that 105 macro. Why do I want to carry it again?
Yeah,
So you over the course you realize these are what the stages are. This is what my axis is. This is the kind of stuff that I'm going to shoot. This is where I'm going to be in the crowd. If I'm shooting in the crowd, kind of crowd shots I want. So you tailor it to what you're thinking that you might want to be shooting. Or I tailor it to what I'm thinking.
and sometimes it's fun just to have that straight 50 1.8.
Ooh.
The little stubby guy. For fun.
Lightweight thing.
Yeah.
or that 10 millimeter wide angle lens, which
Right.
got me some interesting shots too. But yeah.
I want to mention to our attendees that they can ask questions. I will be conveying the questions to the panel. I've seen one or two yet, and I haven't conveyed them, but we'll be getting to them. So please, if you've got questions as we go along, type them in to the question box, and I'll begin to read those off in a little bit. Richard, so your situation is the same. You found through experience what it's comfortable and necessary to carry with you, and you carry only that, pretty much?
Yeah, I pretty much, like Karen said, I have two bodies. I carry two lenses, a 17 to 55 and a 70 to 200. And I also carry the 10 millimeter lens for special things. But other than that, that's all I try to pretty much keep, I don't carry a bag because I tend to lose things. I forget. I just leave it. I don't want to leave it and forget it there. So I just pretty much have like a little waist packs I go to on my side. And I pretty much keep everything on me, so this way I don't lose anything and forget anything. But that's pretty much it.
Do you carry water also, or energy bars, or pet pills?
Yeah,
Or?
I got my water, I got my nuts and my chocolate bars and everything else to keep me going.
Sunshade, hats?
Huh?
Always a hat.
Sunshade?
Always
Or
a hat.
hats?
Oh no, I don't. Well, yeah, some guys do, some guys don't. I don't. For me, it just makes it too hot. But, yeah, sometimes when it gets really hot, I assume like in New Orleans, you definitely have to wear some type of suntan lotion because you really get burnt out there.
Yep.
So,
Do you ever need to reinforce lighting at all?
well, I'll bring a flash. So occasionally, I'll
Yeah.
throw in a little fill light. Not when the musicians are performing, but let's say if I'm walking around and I'm trying to get a different shot. I'm looking for something that's a little bit different, and sometimes I'll pop a little fill flash here and there. But I really, for the outdoor events, you really don't need flash.
You shouldn't. It's the lighting. I mean, it's stage lighting, theatrical lighting very often, unless you're at real small festivals where they're not doing much with lighting. But flashes change the quality of what you're shooting with a lot of these festivals. I mean, sometimes it's critical, I guess, but with the sensors on most cameras today. Being able to shoot at 6400 speed, even with an f4 lens versus an f2 or 2.8, you should have plenty of light to do most of what you need to do at the speeds you need to do it at.
Well, I think what most photographers' nightmare is the red lights on the stage.
What do they do to the image?
Oh, you can't do anything but just flip all the photos into black and white.
Yeah. Yeah.
Red lights is a nightmare. And I think blue also is a nightmare.
Blue walls, they
Blue
reflect that? Oh, blue light.
No, just blue lights and red lights, mainly.
Do you find that your customers, your clients, want black and white imagery?
I think it's more vintagey. I think it's cool. But I mean, some magazines like it and some magazines don't. It depends who you're working for.
I don't. I find that most of the folks that are asking for stuff commercially are looking for color. Almost all of my artwork is black and white. The stuff that I sell to people for their
Right.
walls.
Yeah.
And I personally think that that's a much more interesting medium to show this kind of work in. I have often found that color is distracting in a lot of this imagery, but that's, again, that was how I started out when I first started shooting, and it was really only when people were paying me for color did I actually shoot color when I first started out. Almost all of my early work is all on black and white film. Now you're shooting digital, and you can have whatever you want.
Yeah.
And so you can play with that back and forth. But in that realm, Karen, the blues and reds don't really bother me because it's all going down to black and white anyway. So it works fairly well for me that way.
Well, do you find that a lot of your final image making is in Photoshop or in the camera? You know, back in the computer. It's not so much anymore what you capture in the moment, but it's what you do in the production of it.
I have an issue with that big time because it's like if you spend all this money on an expensive camera, you should be able enough to learn and know your camera enough to get that image as close as possible that you want, so you're not at home tweaking so much to change your image. I have a little inner battle with that. So the most that I do is probably, you know, brighten it up a little bit through exposure and maybe sharpen. That's the most that I do. But, I mean, I haven't gotten to the Photoshop stage or anything like that, no.
Richard, what do you see that way? Richard, are you doing tweaking and various things post-shooting?
A little bit. I do a little brightening, darkening, sharpening, but I'm not really too much into Photoshop. I don't know. I don't have a very good Photoshop skills, so that's pretty much as far as I go with it. If it's a little bit too dark, I make it a little brighter. If it's not as saturated, I make it a little more saturated. Other than that, I just leave it alone because I'm shooting like, on an average on a festival, maybe 2,000 pictures.
Wow.
You know, and I shoot a lot. So for me to have to come home and edit it through Lightroom and tweak all that, I'll be here forever. You know, so I just don't have the time for that.
So you think
I try to get it right. I try to get it right in camera, and if I can't, then I work in it just a little bit on the ones that I really, really like, and everything else I just send out as it is.
So you have about 2,000 shots in a 2-day festival or 3 days?
No, in a one-day festival.
In 1 day.
For me, it's a lot. A lot of people think I'm crazy, but I shoot a lot. I pretty much envision my camera as a video camera, and for me, I have to shoot through the moment, and at the same time, I'm all over. Besides shooting what's happening on the stage, I'm also running around shooting stuff that's happening outside, around the stage, in my environment. So by the end of the day, I'm looking at 1,800 to 2,000 pictures. It just happens that way for me. Other guys can go ahead and shoot a couple of hundred shots, but that's for me. I just can't. I haven't been able to do that.
How many do you get them down to? What do you find is your keeper's rate?
Usually, I get them. If I shoot about 2,000, I keep about for myself about 800, and then I reduce that down to like about 50 to 100 that I need to send out to the to the editors and so on and so forth.
Nice.
And then I'll put the rest of the photographs, my own personal photographs, to the side. And when I have time, I'll come back and I'll start deciding if I want to convert it to black and white or color, or just leave it alone, or whatever. I have a lot of photographs in my archives right now from 2008 that I still haven't got to yet. So I got a lot of work to do.
And Karen, what kind of how many photos do you come out with of a day? Are you a big shooter like Richard is like that?
Oh, God, no. I used to be, but no, I come home like about 350, somewhere around there.
Uh-huh.
You know, I used to come home with a lot, and then, you know, you're playing with yourself like shoulda, coulda, woulda, I wish it was this, I wish it was that, and I just delete. Because I always tell myself there's going to be another time, there's going to be another chance, just let it go. You know.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. And Scott?
I'm a medium shooter in that way. I'll shoot anywhere from 1,000 to 2,000 a day, depending on the day. I mean, if I find myself after shooting black and white for so many years and paying for most of my own film, and I was very judicious about how I shot. With digital, I allow myself to play a lot more, and I'm a pretty quick editor, so I don't have. I mean, I can bang through 2,000 images in a couple hours to get the core ones out. Sorry? Yeah.
Scott, are you using Photo Mechanic?
No, I use Lightroom.
Lightroom? No, because I've been using Photo Mechanic for the past 2 years, and for some reason, it's a good thing and a bad thing, because once I got it, I've been able to go through my image, like 2,000 images within less than a half hour to 45 minutes, as opposed to doing it before, where it was just I had to go through each one. I was using Aperture, of all things. And that took me like forever to get through the raw files, to upload, and to actually preview the files. But with Photo Mechanic, I've just been able just to go right through that thing like nothing. And I guess it's good and bad, because then you get in the habit of shooting too much, and then you find yourself with 4,000 pictures, and then what do you do next? So, but yeah.
Do you save everything on hard drives, though, in case you need reference to it later, or something like that?
So when I shoot 2,000 images in a day, I'm usually throwing away, right on the first edit, I'm throwing away a good 25 to 40% of that. It's just gone. Not because they were necessarily bad images, although some of them certainly were, but they're images that I look at. And when I teach people photography, the first question is that an interesting image? What's interesting about that? And if it's not an interesting image, it's gone, unless there's a particular thing about it that I think will be useful at another point. So 25 to 40 will go away completely, and then there's maybe 10%, 5 to 10% of the rest that get stars enough to go back and continue to look at them. And so that batch, yes, does get to hard drives in some fashion.
Well, we've seen a couple of your images. Maybe this is a good time, Karen and Richard, to pick up a couple of what you say are interesting images from Jazz Fest, have them so that we can show our attendees what kind of work you've been doing there.
Okay.
Can you do that?
All right.
Well,
Yeah,
while
sure.
they're doing that, what's different, both Karen and Richard commented that they don't work their images a lot, initially at least. And I don't work my image a lot initially, but I often will definitely go back to it. Have we seen?
I think that's me.
Yeah.
Oh, there you are.
Yep.
Oh, look at her.
Beautiful.
That's great.
That's, yeah,
Dee Dee Bridgewater.
yeah.
I mean, it's a tad grainy. I don't really like grain, but some people do.
Gives it an age feeling.
Which
When was that
festival
shot?
was that?
Oh, this is the Monterey Jazz Tour that came through Detroit.
Nice.
What was that? This past March.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see.
So you're going for the intensity and the expression,
Yeah.
the pose, the balance of the image.
Well, Dee Dee Bridgewater she's just fantastic. She's always giving it to you. She's tons of expression, and she's quirky. Every show is not the same. That's why I really like her.
Yeah, I love it too.
Um,
Richard, you took a wonderful shot of Dee Dee. That was one of the finalists in the Jazz Awards.
Yeah, there was actually a shot at Carmore. I don't know if you can see it. I just put it up on the screen there. Can you see that?
I think this is still Karen's, maybe.
Oh.
Okay, no, all right, fine.
well, that's Roy Ayers. Shot that at Shane Park, which is another outdoor amphitheater situation.
Uh-huh.
And-
Interesting the way his Ayers is going down and the applauder is going up.
I guess he was a hype man. He did not pick up an instrument, so I don't know why he was there. But he was there.
Joanne, were you going to switch over to Richard's desktop? Did you have something up, Richard?
Yeah, I got actually the photograph that took a VD over at the Carmore Jazz Festival. I'm not sure. Hold on a second. Can you see that? Is it coming up?
There we go.
Oh,
Oh, sweet.
yeah.
Can you see it?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, yeah, that was at the. That actually was nominated for a Photo of the Year this year,
Wow.
Right. Right.
and yeah, that was one of my favorite shots of her. What else do I have here? I got another shot here. Actually, it was last year at Newport with Kurt Elling.
Uh-huh.
See that?
Wow.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And,
So do you think in front of these big crowds that festivals gather, that the performers trying to make a more grand gesture because they're trying to communicate to the distant audience, and that gives you a chance to shoot something that's especially dramatic?
are you asking me, Howard, or you?
Well, all of you.
Oh. No, I think that just musicians are just being themselves and just enjoying the music, and we're just there to, capture those moments. So I don't think they're doing anything other than who they are, personally. That's what I think.
Let's talk for a moment about this notorious, 3-song or 10-minute rule or something like that. For people who are not professional photographers yet, can you explain what that is and how it's gotten instituted? And more important, is there any way around it?
No, there isn't.
No.
It's the management, in my experience. I mean, more than 20 years ago, you didn't see that at all. You'd have a persnickety artist that just said, I don't want anybody photographing me. But you pretty much were able to photograph how, what, and when you wanted. And over the last 20, 25 years, and again, my experience is the record companies and the agencies have tried to take a much greater, have taken a much greater control over what imagery people are allowed to see of artists. So that Bruce Springsteen show, everywhere that he performed, everybody got those first 3 songs, and those first 3 songs, almost universally, were the same 3 songs. Were they played exactly the same way? Not necessarily. Can people get different imagery from different angles? Or to a degree, but you all have access to the exact same time frame and the exact same imagery because that's the only stuff they want to see. They don't want to see the sweat dripping off of Dee Dee Bridgewater's face because, and that's not necessarily a good example, but for example, because that's not going to sell her image, in my opinion. I think it'll sell her image a lot, personally, but that isn't what the agencies or the record companies think. And sometimes it doesn't come from the artist at all. I've talked to artists who said, you know what, if it were up to me, you'd be on the stage the whole time, but, John said that I need to keep it, blah, 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 right? It's
At the
really
same
for the
time,
festival.
You're seeing non-professionals in the audience who have their cell cameras and are just clicking away, right?
And, yeah, although you get artists like Bob Dylan, who has people out in the audience, his own guys out in the audience, taking cameras away from people. It gets, it's taken to this really horrendous extreme, if you will. And with the bigger artists, it's often like that. It's like nobody can. I mean, the people that pay extra at festivals to be able to get near the pit, right? They're often the next stage before the pit. That's the way festivals are making more money. They can sell higher priced tickets. So those people, they used to buy those tickets because they could shoot after we were done. Now they can't even shoot after we were done with a lot of the bigger acts.
That's mostly pop acts, you think, or are jazz acts having that kind of...
Jazz artists are in the same realm, in my experience.
We've got a perfect example with that. It would be Keith Jarrett.
Karen can't hear you as much.
Oh, that would be Keith Jarrett. That was our perfect example right there.
That was a classic story, and what happened in Italy just recently.
Yeah.
I mean, he had the lights shut down. I mean, it was just ridiculous.
I think we have the famous photo.
And the funny thing about that, about 15 years ago, I shot him at the Blue Note with the F3. I was right in front of him and got some great shots. He never said a word. 15 years later, the whole mindset of his business changed to the point that you can't even get close to him anymore.
Joanne, do you have that shot? We'll see.
But you get complimentary cough drops from him, too, as well.
His music is...
Betty Carter was one that used to she didn't literally, but she virtually spat at the photographers in the front of the pit. Mostly because a lot of the photographers were acting like idiots. It's like, oh, we only have 2 songs, so they're just being really, and they have to get in there. It's like, no, you know, if everybody's being calm and gentle about it, everybody gets what they need. But they weren't, so she just starts railing on them and then basically kicks them out. This happened twice at Jazz Fest.
Well, it can be very distracting for the artist on stage if people are like all over each
you know
other.
what it is? There's so many guys there that I think are there for the wrong reasons. Either bloggers or guys that just pick up a camera and then whatever, and they just don't understand that besides it being an art form, there's certain etiquette, there's certain things you gotta do, and certain things you cannot do when you're in that pit. Or God forbid you get backstage access. Because I've seen a couple of photographers that were backstage and they're doing some outrageous stuff, and I had to talk to them and said, listen, before you get kicked out and I get kicked out of here, you can't do certain things you cannot do with the musicians because they'll get pissed off. But, you know.
I mean, there is sometimes some photographers do know photography etiquette and some just don't. You know, I've been clocked on the head several times, and I've literally had to push back as well. I mean, I don't know if it's because I'm a female photographer or just, you know, a photographer, period, but a lot of times you just have to get what you have to get, you know, because it's working, you know, and you just have to push back.
That's not because you're a female photographer, love.
Maybe.
I mean, I've felt the same also.
I
Annoying.
think that moment, I think what happens when you get that 2-song minimum, that it becomes this frenzy that goes on, and there's tunnel vision that everybody gets. So they got to get, they got to get the angle, they got to get the shot, and they just forget who they're standing next to or whatever, and it's all about is it all every man for himself mentality that tends to happen with some guys, and unfortunately it just is the nature of the beast. I mean, it's hard.
I disagree, actually, Richard. I mean, that's definitely something that's there, but I don't agree that that's how it has to be. I have, in the same way, I've counseled a lot of young photographers as they've come through festivals that I've been at, and I think the more we, working folks that are doing it right, the more we present the good example, the more the folks that are supposed to be there will respect that. The problem, Howard, is that there's way too many people in the pit that don't need to be there. They know somebody that gave them to this, or the blogger thing.
No, I agree.
The blogger shouldn't have access. I mean, don't get me wrong, but
that has happened as well. You know, the people are in the pit that are not supposed to be there. But if you have your camera on continuous shutter, click, 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 and you're standing in that one spot, and you're like, click, 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 I'm sure you've gotten something by now. Move yourself out the way for somebody else to get the shot.
right.
You know.
Yeah.
I think a couple of you at least are on the Facebook Jazz Photographers list. Do you have these kinds of discussions online, trying to suggest what appropriate photography etiquette is? Or do you need a platform to have those discussions?
I think it'd be great to have a platform to have those discussions. I mean, I've had those discussions with the press coordinators at festivals. Again, you get to know these people fairly well if you shoot the festivals long enough. And when there's an incident in the pit, they're often coming to you or somebody like you saying, "What's going on? Why is this such an issue?" And then you have the discussion. And what was the festival? I'm sorry, I'm blanking. But there was a festival I used to shoot that they came to a couple of us at one point saying, they're going to eliminate photographers from the festival if you guys don't figure out how to do this right. Like, okay, let's talk about that. I mean, we've talked about putting together the etiquette book, ethics of being a music photographer, because they're really commonsensical. I mean, Richard, Karen, I mean, it's common sense. It's taking care of, acknowledging that there's other people in the world.
It's about being aware of your surroundings. I mean, you just don't jump up and get in front of somebody. You just always have to be aware around you, get your shot, and move out the way.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, we've talked about the Jazz Journalists Association trying to provide a platform for these kinds of conversations amongst our members. That may be something that we have some announcements about later in the fall or something like that, if that would be helpful. Let me see if I have any more questions, and then we're going to turn to some of the questions that the attendees have been putting in. Let's see. What about releases? Do you have to get releases from anybody?
Depends on what you
How
want
do
to
you
use
do
it.
that?
Yeah, it depends.
Depends on what you want to use it for. If I'm selling it as artwork, I don't need a release. But it's a gray area, to be quite honest, and I've been challenged on it. But generally, you can work things out. But if I want to sell it to Coca-Cola for them to use in a national ad campaign, I absolutely have to have a release for it.
Yeah.
But I always go back for those. I mean, Richard, Karen, I mean, when you're shooting 100 artists in a day or over 2 days or 3 days, how are you supposed to even think about getting releases from them, much less getting access to get the releases? I mean, it's really not a feasible thing.
Yeah, so I'll go back later.
And that's how I've often dealt with it. I did a campaign, a couple of campaigns for Bose Corporation, and they were doing a world music campaign and a jazz campaign, and they came to me because we had done some work before and said, we want to use some images. So I showed them 100 images, and they chose 6, and I went to the artists and said, this is what they're doing, this is what they're offering, you got national exposure for this. Everybody signed on. I mean, it wasn't an issue, but you do have to go back for that. There's no question.
Yeah.
When it's a commercial.
I
Yeah, I
understand.
think also,
Go ahead. Go ahead.
yeah, and also particularly when it comes to merchandise, if you try to sell things with your image on it, then you're gonna have to, then you're touching a sensitive issue there. You're gonna have to go through the channels in terms of getting it approved to do that. You know.
Well, selling means like
For the most
selling
part,
it.
I never.
You mean like selling it on a T-shirt or a mug or something like that? Sorry, got a little background noise. Selling it on something else to be sold, not selling prints.
Right,
Is that-
right. That's what I mean.
Right. Okay.
Right. Yeah.
But Karen, I understand that you sell prints and also mugs. Is that true? At the festival?
No, not at the festival.
Yes, ma'am.
No. No, but if you go to my Zenfolio website, you can place my photo on a mug. Oh, sorry. On a T-shirt and stuff. That is available there.
I see. I see. But Scott, you have you sometimes take a booth at the festival. Is that right?
I've had a booth at the New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Festival for about 17 years, with 1 year off in there. And it's a juried exhibit, so every year you have to submit a set of slides for them to decide whether they want to have you there. They have, in the area that I usually show in, which is contemporary arts, they have 60 artists for each weekend. And the weekend they change the artists per weekend, so you can only have a booth for one of those weekends. So if you get accepted, then you go and you sell whatever work that you're interested in selling. I've been selling performance imagery for that time, and it's a great way to get exposure regardless of how much you're selling, and it's almost always, I mean, we've had a few bad years and recession was a little bit tough on arts, but for the most part it's always been a good financial year, and it's always great to be out there because there's a client that I have right now who I'm producing 32 images for a wall in his, or a series of walls in his office because he had seen my work there, liked my stuff, and said, hey, I've got this project, you interested in it? So, yeah. So those kind of things can come out of it. But yeah, I do sell those images as limited edition prints for the most part. There are some open edition prints. And I have clients that continue to come back and come back and come back. And sometimes people don't buy right off. I mean, selling imagery for me has always been an interesting challenge, trying to decide what people want and how they want it and what might appeal to them versus what is at the core of my artistic interest, and trying to balance those two because it is an enterprise, it's a business, and I have to make money at it.
Right.
And the great thing about it is you have total control in terms of, how you want your print sold and how many you want sold, and if you want to produce a small book or this, that, and the other. I mean, you pretty much you have the ownership of that negative and everything else. So I think it's great.
Well, there will be a booth this year at the Detroit Jazz Fest for a project that I was involved called Jazz in Sync, where it was headed up by photographer Tony Graves out of New Jersey. that we were supposed to take our city's musicians, all of our city's musicians, in front of one of our jazz institutions, and I had about 90 musicians in front of one of our jazz institutions here, which is Baker's Keyboards Lounge, and it was shot at the same time all around the world. So that image will be in a poster form, which I did get model releases as well, and we're going to have a booth down at the Detroit Jazz Fest this year. So the cities that participated was like, I think, DC, Detroit, Chicago, LA, San Francisco, and then I have a friend of mine who's in the Ukraine area. I think she participated too. So.
I'm sorry, we didn't know about that.
Next year.
Next year.
Well, let's get to some of these questions that people out listening to us have been posting. This is from Oscar Mora. He says he's a jazz guitar player. 3 years ago he developed his photography at Riviera Maya Jazz Fest and took photos of people who were his heroes. Now he has a nice photo collection. He wants to sell some of them. How can he expose his work correctly in order to find someone interested in it? Suggestions on how this guitar player can begin to market his photos.
I would definitely start off with a website.
And just show what you've got and try to build a name for yourself as a photographer. Pretty much.
There's a lot of websites that have like those templates already, preset, Smug Mugs and Folio. I would try that route first.
Okay.
Yeah, there are plenty of photo sharing sites that you also have Flickr too. I've actually made some sales on Flickr, but when I do actually post the pictures up, I put my name, my watermark straight through the picture so they can't. And I also make the file size really small so they can't take it. But I've taken, I've made a couple of sales just from Flickr alone, just posting them up there. And some guys from Australia saying, "Hey, I love that photograph you took of Blue Donaldson. How much would it be? Can you send it to me?" And so on and so forth. So I mean, you got to post them up on the sites. You can develop a website, but if you don't have a website, there's plenty of different. You have SmugMug and you have Flickr that you can actually post the pictures up, and somebody will take interest. There's a jazz fans out there that might be interested in the photograph.
It looked like Oscar did send his link to his site, which is www.morajazz.com, morajazz.com/concert photography. So anybody who's interested, check him out at morajazz.com/concert photography. And then Greg Savage asked whether a release is required to sell prints of performers, and we pretty much answered that. You don't need a release to sell to the magazines, but if you're going to sell for commercial purposes, marketing purposes, something like that is necessary. Here's a guy named Ray Shaw asking, without credentials, is it possible to get good close-up shots of the performers at Newport?
You have a really long lens.
You can't.
Yeah, insert equipment.
Well, no, if you get there early, because they have an area that's pretty much blocked off for photographers. But behind that, a lot of folks get there really, really early, and they camp, with their chairs and everything else. And I see a couple of people with the cameras and taking pictures and so on and so forth. So if you get there early enough and get yourself a nice little spot, usually security doesn't really bother you too much with taking pictures. I haven't seen anybody be involved with taking pictures behind the pit. So
Sometimes it's even a better spot than the pit because as the stages get taller, if you're sitting very close to the stage, you don't really have anything except for nose hairs to shoot, which can be rather annoying.
I got a friend of mine, my friend, photographer Ben Johnson. I mean, he shoots for Jazz Times. Actually, and his wife writes for Jazz Times. She sits like in the third, like a little third row thing right behind the pit, and he'll just come around and just sit there and take his shots from right there. And he really gets some great shots just sitting down next to his wife and enjoying the show, as opposed to being in the pit. So.
The only difference between sitting in the audience in that sense and sitting in the pit is that at least in the pit, if there aren't too many people, you have the ability to move, to change what your perspective is. And shooting from the audience, generally, if it's a big crowd, you know, you have one perspective that you can shoot from, and that, yes, you can definitely get a nice shot, but you can only get that nice shot. There's not a way to
Well,
really
he has a
explore
convenience of having access to being in the pit, and at the same time, when he gets tired of taking those types of shots, he'll go ahead and just come around the other side and just get some shots from there, and sometimes comes out with better shots than we would get inside the pit. So, yeah.
Do you ever wait for people to get off the stage and try to catch them in a candid, you know, close-up as they're walking across the field or something like that?
No.
I mean, sure, yeah.
Do I do a paparazzi thing? No, I try not to, unless I know the guy. Then I'll go up and say, hey, I'll try to grab a shot. Like I actually did with Kurt Elling. He and I are kind of friends, and he approached me, but when he started to speak to me, he pointed his finger towards me, and I just grabbed the shot. And it was just one of those moments that if you know the person, you feel comfortable, they feel comfortable with you, you go ahead and grab a shot like that. But I wouldn't, for me personally, go up to somebody and just throw a camera in their face and expect for them to respond, other than probably hit me or something like that.
That also comes back to the interesting shot. You know, what's interesting about somebody standing in the middle of the field, right?
Yeah.
I got a shot of Kurt Elling. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, right.
So,
Well, it depends.
Yeah,
It depends
yeah.
how far away you are, and a lot of times, you know, when musicians get done, they're backstage, and the camaraderie that's going on between the other musicians. Like I have a really good shot with Pat Metheny, Ben Williams, and Christian Scott, just standing there talking and laughing. But I was about a good 20 feet back, so then you're not feeling so intrusive, you know.
But did they know you were there and shooting?
Yeah.
Kathy Plummer asks, any special lenses for night shooting?
at night they should still have lights. If they don't have lights, there's an issue.
2.8.
1.4.
1.4.
Right. It's a 1.2 nocturnal lens.
1.2.
Yeah. I
And
mean,
Rudy Liu asks, any recommendations regarding monopod?
you need a monopod if you need steady. But if you don't need steady, then you shouldn't need a monopod. They can get in the way, and very often I find myself tripping over other photographers' monopod, but they're either in the process of moving it or they dropped it on the ground because now they're done with it, and it's like, yeah, thank you very much for me having to step all over that. Again, I would say because you can now shoot at 6,400 or 12,800,
Right.
why do you need to have a monopod at that point?
It's a good weapon to protect your equipment with.
That's a different story. And for somebody that's being jostled in the pit, it can be a nice in the elbow and in the gut. But
Well, I just shot, well, it seemed like from Newport it would be ridiculous to walk around with a monopod, but like with Canmore, I just shot Canmore, and it's a long festival. So after, it's a small festival, small stage, small audience. So after a while, you with all that heavy lifting of those cameras and everything else, I use the monopod a lot because after a while it was just too heavy for me to look around. But it was a very easy environment to shoot. There weren't a lot of people there, so it's a luxury that they have to do once in a while. But places like Newport, it would be almost impossible to do something like that.
well, if you're shooting with really big lenses too, if you've got a 300-2.8 or 400-2.8, yeah, you're going to have a monopod.
Yes.
The only guy that I know that shoots with that handheld is John Anderson out of Atlanta, and he's just this huge guy. He just kind of holds something out there and shoots it. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Let me keep moving along. Rita Brooks says, my photo buddy has established a trust with several musicians. He just walks right across stage and shoots for a few short seconds. I usually shoot from the front side or below in the crowd. What's a general stance on this kind of positioning practice? I think she means just like getting up on stage and walking across the stage and shooting for a second or two. That will get you thrown off most stages, won't it?
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Right.
Thrown off stage, sent to the hospital, stuff like that.
I mean, generally there's room behind the stage or on the back side of a stage to move around, particularly if you're discreet and if you've got a good stage manager that you have a relationship with, and as well as an artist. Then, I mean, I've gotten shots where I've come fairly close, but nobody knows that I'm there because I'm hiding behind a speaker stack or some amplifiers or something like that. My job is not to be seen. I'm not to be seen on stage, and if I'm seen, I did something wrong, generally.
And not to intrude on the performance. You don't want people to be paying attention to you instead of Bruce Springsteen, as if.
Yeah, well, that wouldn't happen anyways, but yeah.
Gene Marlowe, who's a pianist and a professor and multitasking guy, asked about equipment. How much extra battery power do you carry? And how many digital cards and what kind of GB size do you carry?
For me, I always put the external battery on the bottom of both my cameras, and then I usually have 6 batteries with me. I don't like 32 gig cards. I feel like it's going to jam up and I'm going to lose everything, so I'm pretty much a 16 gig and carry a couple of 8s. I don't know, I just have this fear that the 32 is going to jam up and I'm going to lose everything, but that's pretty much what I do.
I carry a couple extra batteries. Again, I'm like Karen, I shoot with 2 bodies, so I'll have an extra battery per body because I've found that they last. They generally, a single battery will generally last me through what I need for a day, so I'll just keep it just in case. I'm on the other side, Karen. I used to not want to go beyond my 8 or 16 for that very reason, but I've been shooting with 32s now for a few years, and particularly as the file sizes are getting so much bigger. I mean, like shooting with the D800, you have a 16 gig card in there. You're looking at maybe 220 images if you're shooting raw, which is what I shoot. So I shoot with 32s, and when I can afford a 64 at some point, I will probably jump to that. I haven't, knock on wood, I haven't had a card die on me since micro drives. These little cards that they were actually little tiny hard drives that you could put in there. And I had one of those fail on me, and it was I lost my life. And that was the Pulitzer Prize winner was on there, but since that I've never lost a card, knock on wood.
Julia Whetstone says she's asking about ways to get. She's not in the pit, and she wants to get more of the performer, less of the equipment on stage. How do you work around mics and amps and cords? How do you figure out how to get those out of your shots?
Crop. I mean, crop in the camera. You crop in the camera. You shoot with longer lenses if you need to. You change your position if you need to. But the microphones are the bane of my existence also, and I try as hard as I can to make sure that there aren't microphones that don't have to be there. So, but most of my imagery tends to be pretty contained. I don't have a lot of stage shots. I don't shoot a lot of stage stuff.
You like basically close-ups and busts-ups.
I like tighter imagery. Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, we should say that you all have websites up that have nice samples of your work, and we urge people to go to them. Scott, tell them what your website URL is.
Barefoot Photography, that's B-A-R-E, foot, F-O-O-T, photography.com.
And I'm sorry, Richard? There it is, Richard.
Yeah, I actually have a SmugMug site, and it's www.richardcondephotography.smugmug.com, and so that's the website.
And Karen?
I'm at KarenFoxPhotography.zenfolio.com.
Thank you. So that was a question by Greg Savage. Karen wants to know, William Thomas says, the young man next to Roy Ayers is his vocalist.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Thank you, William Thomas, for that. And, yeah, he's also saying, with the time allowed in the pit, would it be much easier to establish a position outside the pit? I think you asked, I think you guys all answered that one also. Gregory Savage asked if he'll be able to listen to this webinar later. And yes, all of the JJA webinars are posted in archival form, so they can be accessed later. That'll probably be available starting tomorrow afternoon sometime. William Thomas asks, if you're in a tent, is it possible to set off camera strobes?
What was the question? I didn't hear?
If you're in a tent, like in New Orleans, Can you set off strobes to enhance lighting?
It's discouraged. In New Orleans, it's discouraged. In other festivals I've been at, it's discouraged. It's annoying. I mean, it's just flat out annoying. I'm sorry.
I haven't seen it done at all.
I have, and you suggested not. Part of it's also you have this big strobe on the top of your camera, and that's blocking everybody else who's either trying to view or trying to take pictures. So again, stepping back to either using a monopod that every so often you might pull out because you need the extra speed, or just shoot with a faster ISO.
Yeah.
Well, I have a friend who I'll leave nameless since you guys don't like strobes, but he puts up remote strobes, bouncing them off ceilings and off walls to kind of even out light, that sort of thing. They're not very obtrusive when he shoots.
The way they shooting.
Yeah.
He's usually shooting in blues clubs when he does that.
Does he have that special permission and access? If he has the special permission and access to do that from the club, that's one thing. But generally, it's totally unheard of.
Okay. So here's a bottom line question about getting paid. What's the range of compensation one can expect for a single photo, for a group of photos?
Are you talking selling it to whom?
Well, that's a good way of trying to limit the question. I think that's a good way of looking at it.
When Gambit calls me for an image that they're running a story sometime later in the year, and I shot whatever show it was, and they need Shamar Allen first. They just ran 2 months ago, and they ran it. It was 3/4 page. It was the lead of this particular story, and that was $35.
But for Vanity Fair?
Vanity Fair is a whole other story. I mean, magazine contracts are very different than shooting for local media. At least that's my experience. I don't know about y'all.
Yeah, local media they're not paying much at all.
But is it valuable for you, like in Fishkill, to get a photo into some local newspapers in your region, just to show that you're there, you're active, and
I don't bother. I mean, in the beginning, I probably would if I was trying to establish myself in the business and trying to either shoot small festivals or try to get some small papers to make myself known. But I wouldn't do it now. They're not gonna pay you anything. If you're looking for exposure, if you're looking for practice, if you're looking for the experience, that'll be the way to go. But as of where I'm at right now, I'm at the point of my career, I wouldn't do it. I just wouldn't do it.
The other side of that, though, is shooting for Gambit gets me a credential at Jazz Fest. So I could get credentialed otherwise. I mean, there's other ways for me to go about that. But this one is a very good way of me going about that. And they're good people. I mean, they don't have a lot of money, so they don't pay me a lot of money. But certainly getting the access that I have at Jazz Fest, it's really worth only getting paid $35 when they use an image, right?
Right. You have to weigh out the.
Yeah, there's a lot of give and take. Obviously, sometimes you'll do it, and you won't get paid a lot, but you get great access. So it's like Scott said, it's a lot of give and take.
Well, when you're assigned, I mean, let's say the best of all possible worlds you guys can imagine, but within reason. If you were assigned to go to a festival with a day rate, would you want a day rate? Would you want a contract that said we expect 50 images or 20 images and this is what we're paying as a flat rate? Or would you want a per image rate? How would you like to see these contracts designed? And what kind of compensation do you think is fair?
Wow.
That's a loaded question.
I know.
It's a tough one, but we're right at the end.
Who is it that's asking, and what is it that they want to use the imagery for? That's always my starting point with anything. If I have a not-for-profit calling saying, hey, we really like that. We have this show coming up, and we really like you to come shoot it, and blah blah blah, and I'm a friend with whomever, then it's almost a giveaway. Yeah, I'll do it because it's fun, and I'd like to help you out. If Vanity Fair called me up, or if Lexus or Acura is one of the sponsors at Jazz Fest, they sponsor one of the states. I think it's Acura. Lexus or sorry, one of the car companies is a sponsor at Jazz. If they called me up and said, hey, we want you to shoot for us, it would cost them a lot of money. It would cost them a lot of money because they have a lot of money to pay, and they're used to paying a reasonable rate for imagery. So I would negotiate whatever I felt was reasonable for that. And I'm sorry to be vague on it, but it really depends on what it is that they want and how it is that they want to use it. So it could be a day rate, and that day rate would include certain rights. Imagery, for me, is all about rights. What rights do you want to have to that image? So when I sell an image to somebody as a piece of art, it's being sold with the rights to hang it on your wall. Period. You can't use it for anything else. You can give it away again, but you're not even supposed to sell it. So if I'm selling something to Vanity Fair is getting it for this issue at this size with these many, with this distribution in these many countries for this period of time. So it can be as broad or as narrow as you want to make it. It just depends on who the client is.
And what your business model is, I suppose.
Yeah.
I mean, Karen, do you have a different business model than what Scott's
No,
supposed
it's pretty much the same as Scott. It depends who it is, you know. And if you know they have the money, then you have to definitely negotiate your rights and what you want them to, you know, use it for. You know, but that's a very good stance that he's taking.
Yeah, the right stance is important, but it's difficult to enforce limitations on rights considering the web ease of transferring information. Although, as Richard said, using the watermark helps. I don't know, maybe only making a small image available online helps. These things, right?
Right.
Sure.
Yeah, I would, especially with the photo sharing sites, you definitely have to put a watermark and make the file size small. I mean, they can take it if they want, but you know they'll have to do a hell of a job, Photoshop job, and really make it work. And the file size will be too small for them to use anyway. You know.
And generally, the person that's going to steal it off a site isn't the person that would have bought it from you anyways. So,
yeah.
I mean,
Right.
It's usually, I found they're usually bloggers. I've seen bloggers that's taking my stuff off of Flickr with the watermark going right across and everything. You know, so I just let it go. I'm not going to make a big issue out of it. But
Good, because I think I do that. I don't know.
if they want to take it, they can take it.
I thought I saw one of Richard's images recently.
Yeah.
You know, I'll put one on with a watermark. I'm proud to do that if it's not across the middle of the image. You know, I like that if a photographer burns their credit in. And, you know, if I'm grabbing it from Google Images. And at first I thought that this was verboten, but now it's like it's for my blog. It's not getting more than 300 hits anyway. So I think I'm giving exposure to the photography, I hope. And you know, I always include credits and things like that.
Right.
So it's a little bit trying to work it out. One more question. Kathy Bloomer asked, have any of you tried the new Lytro camera? The
I didn't hear the
Lytro.
question. What was that,
Have
Alex?
you tried the Lytro, Lytro camera?
That's the one that you can focus afterwards with.
No, never heard of it.
Supposedly you can take an image. Not supposedly, you can take an image, and then you decide where you want the focus in that image. You want it over here. You want it over here. You can do that all post, but it's a very, very, very small file size that you're actually dealing with on those. Relative to what we're producing today, and it's an interesting technology. But then, I mean, for like you were saying, Richard, you don't like to play with stuff heavily after you get it back. You want to see it, you want to do a little bit to it, and you want to get it out, right?
Right.
Can you imagine shooting 2,000 images and then going back and with every, you know, even a quarter of them that you say are good? Oh, I think I'm going to put the focus over here on that one, and you're going to spend another, you know, 14 hours trying to change your focus point?
Yeah, no. Just thinking about it is making me crazy. I don't think so.
Okay, well, one more comment by William Thomas on the strobe issue. I have set up 3 strobes off camera 1 position in the middle of the tent, and each of the side at a distance. That is not too distracting to the musician and got some good results. Talked with the musician after they performed and asked them if they'd seen the burst of light, and they don't notice it. So I don't know.
what venue was this? Where?
Yeah, they must only like that one venue.
It couldn't have been in the United States, maybe in Europe. Not in the United States.
Oh no,
They
I've seen.
they never got holiday strolls unless you had like special permission to do all that stuff. You know.
Just send him to a Keith Jarrett concert. That's all.
Yeah.
Another thing, is there any way you can tell if an image has been taken? There's no way that you know that your images are being taken and used by like a blogger like me, for instance.
Yeah, I can.
How?
I pretty much remember all my images. I can.
But
I
I
think,
mean,
I think all of us photographers have a photographic memory. I mean, I remember 90% of my
I think Howard's point is, if you didn't see it on his blog, how would you know whether it was taken or not? And
of course.
my answer is no, but I don't worry about. I mean, I take Richard's track generally, I think, and I try not to worry about it too much. I'd rather focus on what I want to put out and put it out in the way that I want to put it out. And if somebody wants to do with it poorly, you know, if I find out about it, I'm going to do something about it. There was a woman who was using my imagery to do paintings from, and you know, artistic license is one thing, but she was doing almost exact replicas of what I had. That wasn't artistic license. And I talked to a trademark lawyer, and they said, oh, no, if you want, you can go all the way down the legal route. And I discussed it with her, and, oh, my lawyer said it was okay for me to take whatever image I want at any time. It's like, well, no, you can't. And don't take mine anymore. You know, I have also had artists who say, hey, I really love that series on John Mooney, and I'm doing this thing about John Mooney. And I'd say, please, go ahead. I'm glad that my imagery compelled you to want to do something different. Just credit me. Just say, you know, what's the phrase? Oh goodness, brain fart. Sorry. A representative of. Oh shoot. There's a particular phrase that you use for that. But anyways, I don't have a problem with it if people ask. Generally. So.
you
Yeah,
people,
I don't know what people take. They take and then they get offended that they took. And then that stuff I can't. I got a difficulty dealing with that.
the jazz world, the jazz world. Well, I think we can just about wrap this up. We're at 90 minutes. We've had a great discussion with a lot of really nitty-gritty detailed information that you all put out. So I want to thank Scott Saltzman and Richard Conde, Karen Fox, and hope I'll see you, Richard, I know, over the weekend in Newport. And Scott, I'd love to see you in New Orleans. And Karen, come to the Chicago Jazz Fest, okay?
Definitely.
Okay. So thank you all.
Yay.
Yeah. The JJA is taking August off. We won't have another webinar this month, but in September we're going to introduce a exciting new series of celebrity jazz discussions, and also a series of jazz journalism course that really focuses on the basics. So if we know people who are emerging into the profession, who want to know what the who, what, where, when, why is all about, inverted pyramids, how you distinguish a story from a review, how you begin to build features, how to sell stories, that's the kind of stuff we're going to be covering once a month in workshops, and we're going to be having some exciting panel discussions with confirmed panelists, including Simon Rowe from the Brubeck Institute and Adrian, former director of Jazz Lincoln Center, and Doug McClellan from the Annenberg Center of Arts Journalism, Joanna Keller from the Syracuse Gold Ring education program for arts journalists. And we're going to be talking all about that, releasing information about it. It's a series that's being presented by the JJA, presented by the Jazz Cruise, which is a new sponsor of the JJA. We're very excited about that. So if you want to become a member of the JJA, if you are somebody who's into jazz journalism, please do so. Go to the URL that's on the website, jjanews.org/membership. Or you can write info@jazzjournalist.org or president@jazzjournalist.org. You can find us. We're on the web. We're on Facebook. And thanks again. Karen Fox, Richard Conde, Scott Saltzman.
Thanks,
It's
Howard.
been great to have you on the panel. Thanks, folks.
Thanks for asking.
Good night.
No, cool.
Good night.
Night.